Welcome everyone to the Airport Roundtable discussion. As a reminder, all calls will be in listen-only mode, although we'll have a designated Q&A session during today's call. We encourage you to submit questions at any time by typing your question into the questions section of the GoToWebinar console. Also, we recommend that you expand the viewing window in full screen mode by using the Zoom drop-down box in the upper portion of your screen. This session will be recorded today and made available to participants after the call. Now, I'd like to introduce Betsy. Go ahead, Betsy.
Thank you so much, Carrie. So for everybody, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining. This is our first ever airport-only session for our key customers. Seth and I are really excited to get this series off the ground with you guys. It's been asked for many times over, and we're happy to bring it to you today. We chose the incident communication scenario management as our topic today because 99.999% of you guys at the airports use incident communications today, but only a handful of you guys are using our scenario manager. The scenario manager is completely free with incident communications, so let's all embrace it, let's all learn it, let's all love it today. Our first step this afternoon is to hear from Michael and Doug. Michael is going to share a little bit of history around incident communications, and Doug is going to take a deep dive into incident communications with the scenario manager attached inside the actual tool. And then we will open up the floor for about 10 minutes of QA to ask them anything that you see fit around scenario manager and incident communications. When we have learned all there is to know about incident communications and scenarios, Chris Muncy is going to step in and open his expertise to you. Just so you guys know, Chris serves as one of our technical account managers for airports only and is open to any and all of your questions. In this series is going to be called 10 Minutes with a TAM. And we plan to repeat that series for each one of our conference calls. Finally, Seth is going to wrap us up with an information on Everbridge University and where you can go take more classes for incident communications and scenarios. And he's going to discuss a little bit of our roundtable for the next session. So thank you again for coming. I hope you have a fantastic hour.
Great, everyone. This is Michael Cardarelli, and I'm the director of our transportation practice here at Everbridge. Really delighted that you could be here with us today. As Betsy mentioned in her opening remarks, so much of what we have done with our platform has been based directly on request from our airport customers. I think some folks who, in fact, one of the folks who's a panelist today was a former airport customer at 2 separate airports, and now he's on our team at Everbridge delivering consultative services to our airports to make them more successful. But I think internally at Everbridge, it's broadly acknowledged that our airports are demanding customers, right? But demanding in really the best way, because what we found and what we've shared up to our executive team and what they have come to understand and really embrace is that the stuff that you guys ask for makes us better. Many of the things that we've done for snow team callouts and deployments, and much of the things we've done around automation when there is a baggage system outage to trigger communications directly to the techs who are responsible for that. A lot of these things that were born from airport requests have gone on to be the key solution that's used by the critical incident response teams at places like Amazon and Facebook and Microsoft and Apple and eBay and Uber and many of the Fortune 50, Fortune 500 corporations that we serve on the corporate side of Everbridge. And so there's really broad recognition that it started, a lot of these enhancements and concepts started with the need to serve our forward-leaning airports. So today, what Betsy mentioned, these topics, this roundtable, this is the first, but it's going to be a first of a series, and this is yours. This is for you. We're delivering this for you. The focus in this forum here of the airports only roundtable is going to be, how can we make you more successful with the stuff that you have today? We're not selling anything. We're not going to be talking about all the, There's been a lot of press in the media about how Everbridge's contact tracing solution is what's being used in New York and Florida and all the hotspots, and how the universities are all using contact tracing as part of their return to capacity and that kind of thing. Our marketing team is going to be sharing new capabilities, and we're going to limit the airport roundtable to making you successful with the tools that you have today. So everything that we're going to look at, everything we're going to focus on is not going to involve you spending more money, right? We're not asking you to write a check for the software that we're going to be reviewing today. I think, on the agenda, we were pretty intentional about how we set this up, in that I'm going to do a very high level brief on the incidence module and why. And the reason why I want to do that is because as we look at scenarios, as all of you know, in airport management, airport leadership, and airport operations, and the groups that are using this at airports, people tend to resist change. And but what we found is, once we show folks this is why we did this, there's this recognition that, oh wow, this might take me a few minutes to think about this once, but then it's going to be embedded in this framework, and it's going to save me time in all perpetuity, in an ongoing fashion. So really the purpose of what I'm going to discuss in the incidents discussion is giving you this 1 or 2 minute history of how that product came to be. And then I'm going to turn it over to Doug, who's on the call with us today. Doug is an engineer who's been at Everbridge since 07 or something like that, long time, and he's worked with literally hundreds of our airport customers. And so he's going to discuss, you not only have this incidence module, but you also can use scenarios, why that matters, and how that's even more of a opportunity for us to optimize and streamline our capabilities. Following the session, as Betsy mentioned, Seth's we're gonna do a follow-up survey. So like I said, this is for you, and if you would please fire away questions or comments or suggestions for next time sessions. And if you likely you may think of some tonight or tomorrow or whatever, send those in to Betsy, to Seth, to myself, to the team, because the next ones that we do on these are going to be based on your request and based on your demand. So let me hop into this. I think when we think about the the incidence workflow, I think, let me just hop into the platform. Pictures 1,000 words, right? So I want to share where and why we did this. So back when we first started working for airports in 2002, at that time we were really just a very, very robust communications platform for messaging. And at the time, even when we shared it with airports and discussed it for the first time with airports, the focus was always around speed and efficiency of sending messaging. And we got really good at that. And we got the platform very stable, very robust, rapid, one page where people could type in a message, choose who it's going to go to, select how it was going to be delivered. Is it an SMS? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Am I launching a conference bridge? And they would hit go, and it didn't matter if you were messaging 5 people or 500 or 50,000 badge holders. Everyone would be notified at the same time. And we were really happy with that until we started seeing lots and lots of data over the course of the years. And we started seeing like 2005, 2006 timeframe, we started getting more and more data that proved that people were doing pretty well during routine operational stuff with communication. But during worst case scenarios, there was a very considerable amount of human error. And it was directly correlated really to severity. So when people were looking out at something burning, or when they're looking at a CCTV camera of someone coming up an escalator with an assault rifle, they would make very, very significant mistakes. They would think they notified people that they hadn't. They would send out alert messages and forget to put what runway or how many souls on board or how much fuel remaining. And so we then moved to this incidence module. And the 1 minute summary of incidents is that I, as a user, I may have joined your comm center or your operations center last week. I don't have all your playbooks in my head. I didn't write these response plans, and that doesn't matter. I can communicate just as effectively and just as efficiently as the person who's been there for 30 years and wrote the playbooks, because when I have a situation, if I have an alert, for example, I get a checklist. I don't have to think. What's the runway? Your runways are in here. What's the airline? Your airline list is in here. Flight number, souls on board, fuel remaining. I'm prompted, so I don't have to think. And then the business rules that we built in the back end determine what the payload is, who gets the message, the groups, and how it's going to be delivered. And if we have something like, a different event type, I've got a fuel spill. If I'm new, I may not even know why you're asking me, are storm drains impacted? I don't need to know. I just answer a question. If I've got 3 gallons of Jet A that's spilled on the tarmac, I say no. This message is going to go to 3 people or 5 people that are on duty today. If I say yes, I'm going to add environmental, legal, risk management, maybe the PIO. I mean, this is a bigger deal. This is a hazmat situation. This is an environmental situation. So that's where incidents came into play. And then in 13, we were part of the after action review following the active shooter at LAX. We worked with Lauderdale after that event. We worked with Brussels and Istanbul after the attacks there. And what we found was, even using this, there was still opportunity to improve. And so that's where we then started working on the scenarios concept. And as Doug's going to detail in his more technical review of scenarios and how and why it's important, I think the first thing is to just articulate that this is not a complicated process. What it is we've taken one step further, where the solution Everbridge has evolved one step more in terms of being a digital framework that allows you to build in not just communications templates, but an entire scenario, so that when you have an incident that occurs, rather than things being in this very linear process, okay, I've got an alert, so I'm going to launch the notification. My CEO or my executive director is mandated that the executive team be notified first. As soon as there's something big happen, they want to know first before they get a call from a reporter or something like that. They want to know immediately. And so that's the first notification oftentimes that goes out. And then they want to join a conference, they want to pull a conference bridge together for resolvers. And then they'd like to notify tenants or people, or if we have a power outage, we want to notify tenants this is going on. Because if we don't, we're going to have 100 or 200 or 300 calls coming in saying, hey, there's smoke out there. Hey, the power is out, right? We need to proactively let people know. And what we've seen during some of these after action reports was that the feedback in a lot of these AARs was, hey, airport, you did a really good job notifying senior leadership within 90 seconds. But why did it take you 28 minutes to notify station managers or your tenants? Like, what was the gap? Why did that take so long? The templates were in here. We had them in Everbridge. Why didn't they get launched all at the same time? And in discussing this with all of our customers, we found that there's something that happens when you notify executive leadership. They call the comm center, right? So now you got comm center personnel, on the phone answering questions, and it becomes complicated or difficult multitasking, talking to the CEO. Hey, I've got to also now go and I'm going to stand up the conference bridge. Now I want to inform downstream tenants. And because we're not doing all of these at the same time, and because we're doing them in this linear fashion, the inbound calls from executive leadership, that delays these subsequent steps. So as Doug's going to share with us and demonstrate, the scenario solution allows you to take these unique templates and roll them up to this higher level for an event. And it is oftentimes, if you pick your top 10, top 15, top 20 events, these are things that you've tabletopped on. you know what the overall all-encompassing plan is. This then just allows you to associate everything to execute on that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug to share and show us some of this stuff, and we'll go from there. And then we'll be monitoring the Q&A chat session to see what questions come in, and we'll address those in the Q&A.
I appreciate the tee up, Michael, and hello to all our participants today. Thank you very much again for joining us. As Michael just outlined, what we're going to be talking about today, and I'm going to go through a couple of practical examples, is what we refer to as scenarios. It's part of the incident communication solution that most or all of you are already using. But what we're going to do today is show how you can use scenarios to improve the response and responsiveness of your incident communications workflows. So using any of those examples, as Michael just outlined, right, the bulk of our customer base has already gotten into and built some incident communications workflows. Those templates are going to cover any number of things like aircraft alert. And as you know, something like an alert 3 is going to require a significant number of details that are going to be very important for some of the audience that needs to be informed when there's an event like an alert 3. But there may also be other templates or communications that need to get launched during that same event. There could be an executive bridge or a PIO briefing that needs to get set up using a conference bridge notification that's also part of the Everbridge platform. And at the same time, again, as Michael said, you also need to take care of tenant communication, right? While you're informing, first of all, the ops and the ARF teams and the executives that something significant has happened, you also may be starting to field communications or calls into the communications center from your tenants who are asking questions like, hey, wait a second, I see smoke outside my window. Is something going on? So each of those communications may look wildly different, but each of them is important to get launched simultaneously or as near to simultaneously as possible. And that's really what the Everbridge Scenarios feature accomplishes. So let's take a look at the Alert 3 scenario here. Now what it's doing is, if you can see over here on the right, I have 3 different templates bundled together into the scenario. And that's really, if I had a one-word description of what the scenario is, it's exactly that. It's a bundle of templates that are all going to be combined together. We take all of the different fields, the inputs, the workflows that have been put together to define what information is required in order to initiate this incident, combine them together into one workflow so that as an operator launches this communication, can go down and answer the questions that are going to be presented, just as Michael was talking about a moment ago. Right, aircraft type, go down the list, souls on board, fuel remaining. You can see all of these questions are a superset, right, of the questions that are being presented to each one of the individual templates that are part of this overall operation. So as I get to the bottom here, right, I have a Send 3 Templates Now button. So what I'm doing, now that I've completed the workflow, I've completed answering all the questions for all of the templates that are combined together into this scenario. When I launch this, I'm not just sending one of those notifications. I'm sending all of the notifications across all 3 of those templates. Each one of them has their own template format, has its own communication distribution rules, has its own settings. Some of them may be getting delivered to phones. Some of them may be going out as email. Some of them may be going out and sending text messages or alerting the Everbridge mobile app. Some of them may be getting pushed out to other publishing points like digital signage or other internal communications channels that Everbridge supports. But all of those were launched simultaneously so that now that operator can be freed up to go ahead and start doing the other things that they need to be doing. If this is the communication center, they may be now fielding other questions or follow-up coordinating response events. But you can see that each of those notifications is launched and is already getting responses from the audience that each of those was sent to. Right, that's one incident scenario that launched 3 communications. And again, as the situation continues to evolve, I may be sending out updates, which means I'm going to re-engage that update process, but still having all three of those templates bundled together means that I don't have to go through individual update responses to each of those. Or if I want to pull one of those out and update just one of them, then I can do that from that incident. Now, what that gives us, of course, in the overall view of things is also one container, right, that combines all of the notifications on all of the communication coordination events that related to this particular event, rather than having to have a multitude of different incident containers for this event. Every communication that I send related to today's Alert 3 is all going to be part of this same incident template, which also means my incident report is going to combine all of my tenant communications, all of my coordination communications, my executive briefings. Everything's going to be brought together into one place. Conference bridge recording, everything together into that incident report. Right. All of those for the alert type of alert. We've got a number of different scenarios that a lot of our airports are engaged in. Things like operational responses to things like a maintenance event, again, a power event, an outage at the airport may be another thing that, again, it may have wildly different requirements for communicating to different audiences or different subsets of the overall operations. Right? I may have one notification that's going out to tenants, something else that's going to activate the maintenance team to tell the technicians, hey, we've got an event, we've got a break, and I need to know who's going to be out there. I'm going to be polling them to activate them. So by pulling all of those together into one alert, again, I've got simple form that combines all of the inputs that are requested to execute each of those templates. I could say main terminal. I'm going to say we've got an estimate for up to half an hour, location of break. Right, this information may be important to the technical team more than the tenants, but specific things like might all be part of that notification. As I send out those templates, right, the different audiences, the different groups that are a part of that distribution are each going to be getting, again, a separate communication. Now, how do those communications look? If we take a look at the kind of alert we'd be getting as one of the recipients, right, I may be the tenant communication here, getting an email that tells me that there's been an interruption of power, giving an update expectation, and then a reminder, please don't call airport communications and overwhelm the operations center if you're not reporting a new event. But at the same time, if I'm a technician in the field, I may be getting this email or voice call you see showing up on my phone, because in this case, I'm being asked if I can respond to this alert. Not just a distribution of information, but in this case, I'm actively polling my technician team to see if they're available and whether they're going to respond to this particular event, right? So that each of the operational responses can be acting on the information that they need. We'll go through one more example and show a little bit of the operator preview and capabilities here, which would be a more immediate, again, urgent event, something like an armed assailant or an active shooter at one of the locations. Now, again, that event may have different communications that need to go out to different audiences. The executives are going to want to know a lot of detail about how the airport has responded and what impact to operations is looking like, whereas the people in the impacted area need to get very specific, very concise information very rapidly. People in the non-impacted area, outlying buildings or other parts of the facility, may need to get other instructions. Right? In a situation like this, it's very important that things like, the details are tailored to the specific location of the recipients. So if we go through the information here and put in some details, let's say we're at gate 13, male, white shirt, jeans, shots fired at gate A13, evacuating area, and again, some details, as Michael pointed out, that can be presented in a list format so that the operator doesn't have to think of what are the details they need. They can just simply answer by what's presented to them. Now at this point, if I were to send this notification out, right, I've got a number of different notices that are going to different audiences. And this is what the executives are going to see. And right now I'm looking at the preview mode of this incident. So before it even launches, I can see exactly what the incident is going to be relayed to the executives, while the people in the impact area are getting very specific, very concise information, right? A run, hide, fight message would be typical to be sent to the people that are in the particular location, or if I'm talking about people outside of that location, then I may be giving more of a lockdown or a clear the area alert, right? But all three of those notifications are going to be sent together, right, as I launch this notification. The incident goes out, all three of those alerts simultaneously activated so that nobody is prioritized above the other audiences, right? The executives are informed, the people that are in particular directly in the area, as well as the other residents, tenants, operational staff around the rest of the airport. And of course, again, all of that is going to immediately start collecting information about response, who's received the notification, so that operationally you've got all the information in one place about how that notification's been distributed and how the team is responding. So that's a couple of examples of how scenarios can be used. We're going to go ahead and take a few minutes and open up to any questions you might have. So if you've see the question and answer panel in your GoToWebinar control box, you should be able to submit questions, and we'll go ahead and take a few minutes to answer some of those.
Okay, so one of the questions is, can digital signage be triggered here? So I think what that means is, can Doug, can we have digital signage be a separate template?
Yes, that's a great question, and the answer is absolutely yes. Right, by doing a scenario, you can break out a specific template to have messaging for a specific format, like digital signs that may have other publishing, other formatting that's going to be specific to that specific channel. But at the same time, you're launching that communication along with the rest that are going out to people's phones, email, text messaging, etc. It's a great use of scenarios.
Another question is there training available on this? And I think in general, I think maybe it's related to our Everbridge University platform modules.
There absolutely is. Yep, great question. So any user within the Everbridge system should have access to the Everbridge University and the support center here. So the answer is yes, there's absolutely training available for how to build and organize scenarios. And you can find that in both in topics in the support center, as well as training video sessions in the Everbridge University.
Another question here is, depending on the aircraft event, sometimes not all details are known or shared right away, and can the initial notification be sent without inputting all of the details? And I think that clearly the answer there is yes, but I would even expand on that beyond that to say that we find that it really is best practice just from a communications best practice. It's really important that in your incident template drop-down menus that you do include a field or a label of unknown, right? Because if you send out an event alert for let's say it's we know we have an aircraft coming in, but they didn't we didn't hear souls on board, right? Or we didn't hear some element of it. We're going to know that. We don't know it right now. We're not going to wait to send it out to get that information. So by having unknown in there, it acknowledges to your recipient audience that this is something that is currently unknown, right? So that they have the expectation that you're going to follow up, because obviously if you don't, you're going to trigger people to then call in and say, hey, you didn't put what runway, you didn't, how many souls on board, something ARF might need to know or other people might want to know. By saying unknown, you're kind of conveying to people that that information is to be forthcoming.
Yep. So there are some examples like the one that Michael just covered, where absolutely having a placeholder like unknown can help to, from a best practice standpoint, put a placeholder for information that is going to be forthcoming. But the answer to the question directly is also yes. You can see on here the template that I'm using at the moment has a red asterisk next to each of the fields that are considered required fields. But that's something that you determine at the time that you're composing and creating that template. So other templates may have some combination of, for example, this incident details field doesn't have a required flag on it. Estimated arrival doesn't have a required flag. So as an operator, if I were going ahead and submitting this one, I would be forced or required to enter data on any of those fields that have the required flag. Anything that's not required, I could go ahead and bypass. I could submit this without completing all of those fields.
Very good. Doug, another question here. How does exercise mode work?
Yeah, another good question. So as you can see at the top of my my input field here, I've got the option to activate exercise mode. Exercise mode is kind of an internal flag, but it also does some things automatically, like as mentioned here, it's going to automatically prepend the word drill to any communications that go out. The examples that I showed today, things like an active shooter alert, obviously if you're following best practice, you want to make sure that those templates get exercised and that your response procedures get exercised within the airport on a frequent and scheduled basis. But also you want to prevent undue alarm or accidentally causing people to respond as if it's a real event. So the exercise mode is one way to do that, where it will automatically introduce drill, and it also again notes that throughout the incident history and all of the reports this was a drill and not an actual event.
I think that's really important too. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we want to build into these scenarios. If you have a mass casualty event, many times the airport will incorporate a notification that's going to local trauma centers to let them know, hey, we've experienced a mass casualty event, prepare for inbound casualties, and then please stay on the line. This notification is going to convert to a conference bridge. And we would ask that all trauma centers be ready to report red level and yellow level bed status or something like that. So that notification, you really, really do not want to have that accidentally go out, right? Because it'll ping all the hospitals but at the same time, we need to have that hard coded into this scenario, because think about how long it would take to craft that message just the way you want it. You don't want that to be something that people are doing on the fly. Okay, I don't see any other questions here right now. We're going to that are correlated to this. So we'll move on here to the next component of this, where we're going to have our colleague Chris, address and I'll preface this by saying that Chris, as I said, and he won't say this because he's a really modest guy, but we were really delighted to have the opportunity to have Chris join our team. Chris has got a lot of specific experience that's relevant for our customers. He did several years in emergency ops for an airline. He was duty manager, he was operations manager at Denver and at San Antonio for more than 10 years, and was in each location. He was my customer, and was again one of those very demanding customers. And he would say, "Hey, Michael, this is totally wrong. This should be over here like this, or you got to do that." And so, as he was going to need to make another move, we said, "Hey, what would you think about coming and sharing your expertise with all of our airport customers?" And we were really delighted to have him come on a couple of years ago. He's been making really significant impacts ever since. So with that, I'll turn this over. We have a program internally at Everbridge called a technical account manager that some of our clients elect to have us provide to them, really to make the ongoing administration and consulting and evolution of your communications plan something that we deliver to you as a turnkey solution. And Chris is one of the consultants that delivers on that. So with that, I'll turn this over to Chris for 10 minutes with one of our technical account managers.
All right, thank you. Appreciate everyone joining today. And your participation, and I know especially given the COVID and of course the storms that are approaching, it's a busy time. So again, appreciate your time. Appreciate, Michael, you introducing me and offering the chance to just explain what we do as a technical account manager, and then just offer some ways that perhaps we can help improve how airports are utilizing their system, using the tools that they have so they can get the most out of it. As Michael said, I support airports and some other clients in their deployment of Everbridge and utilization, and try to find best practices, assist with training, and just identify ways that we can broaden the use of the system so you're getting the most out of it. And I know some of the folks on the call here are those who have supported in the past, so it's exciting to see your names on the list. So what we wanted to do just in this 10 minutes with Tam was just to see if there were any questions or anything that, if you had a TAM at your airport, like what would you ask? What would you want us to support you with? How could I, or anyone on the technical account manager team help improve your process? We know it's a trying time, like Michael said, it came from a long time in the aviation world, and it seen where travel is today, and how things are going with passenger counts and whatnot. I know everyone is stretched for resources, and so we just wanted to make sure that we were here to support you, and anything that could help assist you guys in managing what's going on and planning for the future. We wanted to do that. So I don't know if anyone has any questions that they wanted to put in here, and I see one here. But yeah, if you want to ask a question, feel free just to enter it into the chat or into the questions box, and I'll be happy to address it.
So here's one. Contact management is very manual at my airport. It takes up to a few hours a month. It takes a few hours each month. Chris, how do you and your team help with this?
Yeah, sure. So an airport, as we all know, is really dynamic, right? Like we don't just have one employee record like we would at like a corporation, where we can say, hey, we're just going to go into Workday and grab the data out of there and keep it updated. There's people working for hundreds or thousands of different stakeholders, airlines, and the airport itself, and people are coming and going. So what we've done at some airports is take a look at the badging system, and is there a way that we could grab data from there, find a unique identifier per person? As many of you know, you may have folks that have multiple badges, so we don't want 5 records into Everbridge. If they work at 5 different employers on the field, we want just one. But if you have a system that can be a source of truth, we can take that data in via API or a secure file transfer protocol, SFTP, in like an Excel format, and through just a little manipulation, bring it into the system on like a regular basis, so maybe weekly, daily, etc. And then you always have that ability to notify your stakeholders. Now, at some airports, it's required a change to the badge application because folks have put it on there. So we all know that that involves the airport security program. You got to go through the TSA to get that approved. And some airports have done that. Others will just append a enrollment form or more like an opt-out form, depending on what way they want to go with it, on the back of their like badge application packet. So it's not part of the formal like document that's in the ASP. It's an additional tool, and utilizing those opt-outs or those opt-ins, whichever direction they want to take, you can get far greater subscription to your system. And we can derive advertisement around that to really show the importance. And it also illustrates, what are we doing to keep you safe here at our airport? Lots of things are going on. We want to make sure that you're always informed. So it's a key thing that I think can help for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So I think another thing we've seen with a lot of airports, going back to a number of the after action reviews, an area in which airports have received some critiquing is, again, hey, you did a really good job communicating with your internal leadership or a core group of people, but what about the thousands of people who are operating there? Are they not, as important, or do you not feel that's part of it? That sometimes that's part of the critique. And then we also find very similarly in a lot of the after action reports that were put together by independent consultants that were hired by the airport afterwards, they have identified the badge holder as well, first, let me back up. They identify a big gap with how are you informing and communicating with the public, with passengers, with meet and greeters? How are you interfacing with them better? And they all come back. They say, look, you have all of these badge holders. They work at the pizza place. They work at Starbucks. They work or whatever. But they've got a badge around their neck with your airport code on it. And passengers look to them as your airport's representative, right? So it's really important to give them relevant information. I think this is really where, what Doug was showing with scenarios, what an impact it can make, because clearly you'd want to have more detailed information going to your airport staff, internal staff, while you have more public-facing information going to your tenants, because they then can convey that to the passengers in a way that is more appropriate. Just like as part of the scenario, as Doug mentioned, you can have a very, very abbreviated, maybe your digital signage in the rental car center, or maybe your digital signage or your FIDs and bids displays only have a certain character count. You can have evacuation orders or instructions with a very limited character count built into that scenario and waiting, so that if and when something like that happens, it's just dynamically pushing stuff to your roadway signs out on the approach or your digital signage, things like that. Here's another good question here.
And I'll just add really quick, Michael, to that, just if I may, the importance of what you're saying is that it will make your response that much more effective. So working in, an EOC or as an incident commander, like we said at the start of the session, you're going to get calls, you're going to get people pinging your team, and rather than handling the incident, you're managing all the inquiries and you're giving out information that's already old. So if you can just build into the trust of your airlines, your tenants, your stakeholders that, hey, you're in the system, we're going to give you timely, relevant information, we're not going to overburden you with messaging, then they will stop calling you. They will trust in the system. They'll look at the visual display screen if you're sending to that, or to their text message for that information, or for the conference call that you hold with them at a given, prescribed time. And then you'll be able to actually do what you're paid to do, which is manage the situation, get the airport back up and running, keep people safe. So thanks, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great, Chris. Thank you for that context. I think, in terms of the data too, the fact that we've integrated with many of the ID management systems, or the IDMSs. So when somebody starts working at Starbucks, they're in Everbridge, and 2 weeks later when they quit, they're out with no human intervention, right? You don't have to manage any of that data. Another question here, there will be a lot of transition for roles and responsibilities going forward because of COVID. Training for newer staff taking over would be helpful. That's
sure.
More of a statement, but...
Yeah, no, but I get it. So it's a busy time. People may not be able to work. They're sick or they're working remotely. Maybe it's a good opportunity to expand training because people are working remotely and they're not on site. So it could go different ways, but I think it's good to point out that our Everbridge University has recently been completely redone. So we have new content on there. It's a better platform, better user interface, and then also you can actually request it's like super user access or like administrative access to the platform, and assign people on your team training classes to take. And then they get a transcript of what they've taken. You can see their progress. And I know some of the not airports, but hospital clients I've supported, they've actually mandated that, like, hey, you're new to the team, you're going to be working in the, you know, the OR or whatever, you're in the NICU, you need to be able to call in, you know, teams for trauma or something. That's awesome. Glad you're on the team. You're not getting anywhere near our production environment of Everbridge until you've taken XYZ classes. They're assigned to you. And in the meantime, I'll give you a training role, which only allows you to like message yourself and maybe the training coordinator or your boss. And you can play with all the templates. But once you've done, you know, whatever internal training we've prescribed and the Everbridge University courses, and I can see that on your transcript, at that point, I will change a role to a production environment where you can actually hit that big button and say, hey, we've had that plane crash. I need to hold all my, you know, all my trauma teams in, etc.
Okay, another question is here, a top complaint is either over or under notification. How do you address this? So I think that, you know, we've been hearing this, you know, for a while, and what Doug demonstrated earlier is really relevant to this. I mean, this problem of alert fatigue is indeed a problem. So I think you know, I guess, Chris, I think that's a great question, but another question I get from customers a lot who are, you know, considering a TAM or looking at ways they can improve process, they ask that question, but then they also say, hey, well, what's step one? You know, where do you even start?
Yeah, right. So you can always, you know, there can be the chance where you don't have enough people in, right? You're not getting the message out to enough people when something happens. But then the other side of it is people are getting over notified. You know, they're getting stuff that they don't necessarily need or doesn't apply to them, or they're not on the airport. So we have some solutions around that where, you know, you could just put up an incident zone around the airport. So only people, if they have our Everbridge app, are going to get the message. And if they're at home, they don't. We have some other solutions where you can like integrate with badge systems and know who's on property or not. But I think the simplest thing, and we've done this at the airports I've worked at, the simplest thing is to just identify, like make like a matrix of all the templates you have, situations that you send messages out, identify the ones that are sensitive. So if you have a you know, security incident or something, maybe that's not something we want to be broadly known, or maybe it's SSI or whatever. But for other events like fog on the airfield, snow alerts, aircraft alert, perhaps, you know, these sorts of events, which is going to be the vast majority, make them eligible for a subscription through your member portal. So someone can log in to the system. You know, we have them all in there. We can send them invites when they're added to the system periodically, so they can create a username and password. And then they can go in and just check a box like, hey, I do want to receive SMIGS notifications. No, I don't. I do want to receive issues on the roadway. No, I don't. You know, so that sort of thing. Because up until, you know, we were doing that at my prior places, we were getting random calls, often at like the most inopportune time, to the communication centers, like, hey, why am I getting this? And, you know, they don't care that we're dealing with 2 emergencies. They don't want their notification about a, you know, disabled vehicle. So, you know, you put it on the contact and have them enable and disable their options, and then, you know, then you're empowering them. And certain ones like active shooter or something, maybe you override, you know, everyone gets it. But I found that to be really successful, and it's cut down immensely on calls into, you know, our team.
That's good. And as Betsy mentioned earlier, you know, both the, you know, all the scenarios, that's included in what you guys have today. As Betsy said, you know, free is good. And this contact portal that Chris mentioned is also something that, you know, a custom branded with airport logo at the top and your incidents, with the ability to present to individuals the options to select or subscribe in and out of certain types of event groups that you wish to allow them to opt into. That's part of your platform that you have today. One last question here is.
Yeah, and another thing, just really quick, Michael, about member portal too, that airports may not realize is you can allow people to update their contact information manually in there as well. So they don't have to call you and say, hey, put my new cell phone number in. Well, I'm sorry, but we got 35,000 badge holders. We got, love you all, but they got better things to do. So they can go to the member portal and do that themselves.
Very good. Yeah, and you can either, from a configuration setting, you can either open that up to everyone to update all their stuff, or you can lock down certain fields and only allow those individuals to add, for example, supplemental information. So we found that there's actually, in a lot of the unionized environments, they actually don't want their personal cell phone, right, to be part of their contact record in HR, but they will provide it in the emergency notification platform, for that reason. Another question here: how can we gather interactive info from tenants or stakeholders during an event?
Yes. So there's a few ways. One option is through our Everbridge app, and there's a thing called Incident Chat, so that recipients of the message can be immediately input into like a chat room effectively, and they can chat securely within Everbridge. Another thing that I've seen though be successful is like you have something kick off and it's going to have significant impact on the airport or involve a lot of stakeholders, was just to do a quick phone call to them and get them on like a party line and say, hey, this is going on, because that will make it not just one way. Usually a lot of times our messages are just one way, and someone may be able to write back a polling response if we ask them that, but we're sort of prescribing what those responses can be. Sometimes you need input from the stakeholders. Hey, what's your impact? I'm going to close these 2 runways because I got, some guy running around on the field. How bad is this going to impact you guys? They, in certain situations, that's going to be really appreciative, and that's going to speed response up and resumption of normal operations. So one way you can do that through Everbridge is to launch a conference call to select contacts on the airport. You can do that, and people are immediately, they press 1, they are immediately connected to the call, and then we're all able to talk through the situation. In the message, we can even describe initially what the conference call is about, and then to join the conference, press 1. So I think that's a good way that you can get a large or a broad assortment of stakeholders and tenants and airlines on a call without having to make 20 calls in the midst of an emergency, tie up somebody for 30 minutes doing that. You can hit one button and say the message one time, and then everyone else hears all the questions and they hear your responses.
All right, well, Chris, thank you very much. As we mentioned, everyone, a lot of times we wrap up these meetings and then you may think of a question, 5 minutes from now or tomorrow morning when you're having coffee. So please, please forward those over to Betsy, to Seth, to myself, to our team, and we'll be happy to, have an ongoing conversation. With that, I think we're going to move on and have Seth do our kind of recap and cover a few things with you. So I'll turn this over to Seth for kind of for our next steps here.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Michael. So I just wanted to bring us home here today as we finish up today's session. So again, I want to thank the attendees for making the time to join here today. We certainly appreciate you joining us. Hope you found today's session valuable, and what will plan to be the first of many airport roundtables moving forward. So now we had a few questions around Everbridge University and future trainings that individuals can take. So I know Doug kind of touched on where you can access that in the platform. The good news here is that we're going to actually send over links to these trainings as a follow-up to today's session. So these will range from just some basic fundamental courses for some of the new users to get them some experience with just the basic functions of Everbridge, to some of the more in-depth certification courses that Chris mentioned, and these will be all targeted to today's topics, so around incident communications and scenarios. So we will be sending those again as a follow-up. Right now, we're also planning out our next session for airport roundtables. So tentatively planning for November 18th as a date. So there'll be more information to come on that as well. And then when we do close today's GoToWebinar, there will be a couple of polling questions. We certainly appreciate everyone's feedback, on today's session, and then certainly for future topics, to make it as again valuable to you all as possible. So please stay on when we close today's session and provide that feedback. We certainly appreciate it. Yeah, I guess with that, I'll kick it back over to Michael. Again, if there was any final questions that we wanted to address or any closing comments from the team. But again, appreciate everyone's time.
I think we're good. I think we'll just we'll wrap that up. Please stand by for a polling for what you want us to address next. And we look forward to continuing to serve you guys. We'll give you 4 minutes back to your day. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, all.